Boom shakalaka, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters around the world. You are listening to the most conscious comedy podcast in the multiverse, the Chris Shule Journey podcast. I am Chris Shule, aka the Esoteric Noetic, aka the Chocolate Nubian Soul Brother from Ghana, West Africa. Ah, yes. And I just want to say off the bat that the Trump is here. The Trump is here. The Trump is here. The Trump is here. Now, don't get this twisted. If you are a leftist and you were tuning into this, I am not a Trump supporter. I want to make it very clear that I do not condone the behavior of that man. It is a travesty, a failure of the democratic process that we have elected this man. And I also want to make it very clear that we are still counting votes. We need to allow the people of this great country to all have their voice. So don't get ahead of yourselves. Trump is not quite yet the president of the United States. We need to make sure that all the votes are counted. And yes, I do understand that I did say this man would never become the president of the United States of America. But I hold true to that. He is not truly a president. I now believe someone with such a lack of decorum, so unsophisticated, so blatantly disregarding the democratic process, an insurrectionist, amongst many other deplorable moral things, should ever be the president of the United States of America. But here we are. Now, I want to make it very clear, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I've gone through a journey with my fascination with Trump. I want to be very, very clear about this. You know, I started off not knowing much about Trump. And, most of the things that I'd heard about him were not that favorable. And when I started listening to some of the things that he would say, I mean, this is back before 2016 when he was campaigning, talking about how he wanted to go after even anyone that was related to terrorists, waterboard them, do all of this interrogation that was just not cool. I was definitely not down with that, and I still hold by that. And I guess that's the thing with Trump. He is somewhat of a populist, right? But here's the thing about any individual, ladies and gentlemen, regardless of how you feel about Trump, regardless of whether or not you are so frustrated right now to see someone like Trump being elected, or if you are smiling from ear to ear and you are over the moon. People are like verbs. People change. People go through a process. People are not constant. People are often evolving. They have different views on things. And I will tell you what, over the last few years, I've seen certain characteristics that I just, as a human being, I cannot help but to love about this man. And when people ask me, because most of the time people just assume I'm not a Trump supporter, right? And I never really publicly say one way or the other whether I am a Trump supporter, because I don't play that game. I support certain policies about any individual that is in politics, most likely. And there are other policies that I don't support. But as to whether I like the man, I want to straight up say that here's the thing. Of course, this guy is unbelievably charismatic and, more importantly, unbelievably courageous. I could list all of the things that I don't like about him in terms of the things that he has done in the past. That's easy. But that doesn't necessarily make him someone that I would not support just because of the bad things he's done in the past. If we're looking at whether someone is going to be a good president of the United States of America, that's a very difficult conversation. And it's very subjective, but I will say I do like him. And I want the people that don't understand why someone would like Trump to understand that there is a quality that is so unbelievably universally admirable. It is a virtue amongst virtues that when someone has this in droves, it has the ability to bring so many people to that person. And you have a look at figures in history, figures like Alexander the Great, every leader. And I would make the argument that this is a feature of every great leader, and it's courage. And you might be thinking, what, evil, horrible people can be courageous, right? Well, here's the thing. Typically speaking, horrible, evil people tend to be lacking of this virtue. It is a virtue. I always separate virtue from morality because they're not necessarily things that go hand in hand, but the moralistic aspect of this virtue is that it's very difficult to be an evil person if you have this. Because when someone has a tremendous amount of courage, they're willing to fight for things despite the difficulties, despite the tribulations, despite the adversity. They do things that are things that most people would be afraid of, but they do it despite that fear. It is something that is universally considered a virtue. And I don't care what you say, ladies and gentlemen. The idea of Donald Trump not being a courageous person, I mean, you can say many things, but you cannot say that. I can't think of many people throughout history that have been able to endure assassination attempts, the level of lawfare, the ostracization by the media on the level that Trump has. In my lifetime, I have never seen a political figure endure anything quite like that. And quite frankly, I don't think any figures in the last 100 years have to that extent. Arguably JFK. I'm sure there's some other ones, but no one with this that has done it on quite the same level of swag that Donald Trump has. And I don't think, and this was my fundamental point here, that you can be a truly evil person and possess that level of courage. Because here's the thing, typically you find horrible, evil people throughout history. They tend to let other people fight their battles. They tend to be very Weasley-like. That's the quality that I find most deplorable amongst some of the figures in history and present day. Figures, I'm not going to mention any names here, that are quite willing to be authoritative, but hide themselves. They they aren't willing to risk anything. They're usually shielded by all the presidential immunity, all this kind of stuff. But when someone risks their life, when someone risks being completely destroyed publicly, their family, risks suicide attempts, risks assassination attempts, rather, it is something that is so inspiring. And I don't think this is the characteristic of an evil man. Now, of course, a lot of people have spoken about why Trump deserves to be in jail and so forth. They list a litany of all these characteristics about him. The fact that he's an insurrectionist. He is someone that has essentially performed sexual misconduct and so forth. He's racist, misogynistic. And, I have many grievances in the past in regards to things he's done, being behind Operation Warp Speed and all that kind of stuff. But as I think about this, as I think about all of his faults, because this was the deciding factor with me, right? Now, obviously, I didn't vote for him because I'm not an American, but I'll tell you what, I very much do support him as a person, what he's trying to do. And I think he was, without a doubt, a much better option than Kamala. Kamala, just on an aesthetic, subjective level, I just don't like her in terms of the vibe that I get from her, the things that I know that she supports. Every candidate is going to support things that you're not in line with, but there's always a subjective aspect to it. Me personally, the things that I found out about Kamala, I just don't like. I personally do not like prosecutors at all. It is very difficult for me to like you, just period. Blanket statement, if you were a prosecutor, because the vast majority of prosecutors are essentially very authoritative. They're criminalizing things that should not be criminal. And Kamala was definitely no exception to the rule. But the thing about Donald Trump is that here's a man that, granted, obviously there's certain things that he's done that are questionable. I don't support the many policies, but you have a look at the things that he's being accused of doing, and I'm just not really that fazed by it. Like, I heard people on The View responding to Trump obviously becoming the 47th president of the United States, talking about why it was that they lost in the way they lost. Because here's the thing, it's one thing to lose, but to lose so decisively in the way that the Democrats lost is it's a pretty big statement. Now we see the conservatives as being the populars. Things have shifted now. When it used to be the status quo to be a leftist, be this bleeding heart liberal, right? And I'm still very much a bleeding heart liberal, ladies and gentlemen. I am neither a leftist or a right winger or a conservative by any stretch. I am a bleeding heart liberal in my heart, but I have the philosophy of a libertarian. I believe in fundamentally individual rights, natural law. I believe in ultimate maximal freedom, and ultimately, if people want to put me as a right winger because of that, I haven't changed. In fact, it's interesting. About 50, 60 years ago, the Democrats were actually the most representative of those policies. People like JFK were more inclined to respect the ideas of individual sovereignty. But look, that's besides the point. When we're having a look at all of the things that Donald Trump was being accused of by The View, things like misogyny, things like racism, these things didn't really faze me. I mean, he's misogynistic. How? Because he speaks the truth about how he sees the world. He doesn't believe that a woman can be a man can be a woman, doesn't buy into all that kind of nonsense. And the racism that I often hear people accuse him of, this is one of the things I love. Most people assume I'm not a Trump supporter, right? Because they make these assumptions about me. And anytime someone makes an assumption about me, they're most likely going to be wrong because I don't fit the characteristics of any of these typical demographics and so forth. But most people, and I noticed this, but a lot of times people talk to me, particularly women, and they say things implying that there's no way I'd be a Trump supporter. Like this girl, just on Hinge the other day, she was messaging me, sent me a voice message talking about how, she can't, she recently stopped going to a gym because because she thought there were some Trump supporters there. And she just openly said this to me, not knowing. I mean, and I had said nothing on my profile about my political alliances or anything like that. But people will often say that. And I made this post recently. I know I'm going on a tangent here, but people often view me. I made this post talking about how I was very happy with the outcome, which I am. I think it's an amazing thing. I'll explain why in a moment. But I had a lot of people responding, well, at least a few people, and I could smell the shock. They were like, why would you vote for, why would you support someone like that? How could you? And I presume they have that viewpoint because I don't fit the mold. I'm a chameleon, ladies and gentlemen. I think, similar to Trump, I tend to have this attitude where I can change the way that I approach different environments and so forth. I tend to be very diplomatic, but at my core, I know exactly who I am, what I stand for, and I don't budge. And that's another thing that I respect about Donald Trump. There are certain things, certain policies that he had that he absolutely stood strong by, despite the fact that it was obviously going to upset a lot of people and so forth. And I can respect that. And I am very much like that, but I'm also the kind of person that tends to be very diplomatic, and I tend to change my attitude in terms of how I talk to people, but not at my core, not in terms of what I believe. And I think a lot of people, they see this very diplomatic attitude as being a quality that is most exemplified by people on the left. And of course, I'm black and I'm a vegan, so people immediately assume I must be a leftist when in fact, whereas I have the mind of a bleeding heart liberal, ladies and gentlemen, uh, or at least I have the heart of one, I'd rather say. I definitely do not think like one. I can actually see reason and logic. I believe in individual rights. I believe in reality, objective reality. And yes, there are two genders, ladies and gentlemen. I don't bind all that nonsense. And yeah, I got some guns. I actually take good care of myself physically, mentally. I believe that you're entitled to the fruits of your labor. So if that makes me a right winger, well, okay. But yeah, I found a lot of the people had these assumptions about what I should think, and they were very disgruntled the fact that I decided to support, well, for all means and purposes, yes, support Donald Trump in the fact that he has become the 47th president of the United States of America. America, fuck yeah! And I got to tell you, the reason as to why I very much like the outcome, because to be honest, when I was watching the votes come through, I wasn't quite sure because my whole attitude was I was going to enjoy this either way. It'd be so fascinating if Trump lost again, just in terms of just to see what would happen. It's called like an entertainment show to me. But I realized that it wasn't just entertainment to me when I really started seeing the tally. And I was actually not just excited, but I was happy. I was happy about Trump becoming the president because ultimately it feels right for someone to endure the level of hatred, the assassination attempts, that level of scorn is just unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it. And the momos out there, right, that are still talking about how Trump wasn't really assassinated, this is just some kind of like fake news. These people need to, I mean, this is almost as bad as the Flat Earth Society shit. This is the levels of intellectual gymnastics that you need to in terms of your understanding of reality, how it works in order to arrive at this idea. Well, I don't trust, you can't trust the media, you can't trust anyone, so we're going to assume that Trump has decided to be involved somehow or in his assassination attempt. Or people are so skilled that they can change the course of, or they can influence they'll try to influence you by creating some kind of fake assassination attempt, right? As a way of trying to garner more support for Trump. These conspiracy theories, and I will use the word conspiracy theories because whereas there are conspiracies that take place, then there are also theories in regards to speculations about what's going to happen and so forth. And a lot of these are stupid. They're just unwise and stupid. I deal in conspiracy realities, and sometimes I tend to avoid the predictions, that a lot of people make, unless of course they're just so obvious, and I'll say them. And anytime you make a prediction, you might be right, you might be wrong. But the theories in regards to conspiracies that are said in an objective sense in regards to how something is actually going on with no basis for it, I'm not a fan of that. That's something both the left and the right tend to do. The left buys into this conspiracy theory that there aren't people in government that are conspiring to actually achieve things and actually influence you. And yeah, the right sometimes sees things that are not actually there. They come up because they have been cheated so many times. They have been tricked by the mainstream media so many times. They think everything is conspiracy. Now, in regards to the whole Trump scenario, like my fundamental point was for someone to go through all the shit that Trump has gone through is unbelievable. And because of that alone, I think it puts you at a level where people have a lot of respect for you. To respond to that level of adversity after you have just been an assassination attempt has been made on you, and to rise your fists up in defiance like that. That's the kind of stuff you only read about in history books. For someone to possess that level of defiance is incredible. That is the quality that I think most people are moved by, and that's what really really inspired me. And also, I actually like a lot of the policy, a lot of the people that got behind Trump. I mean, the level of diplomacy, because this is an aspect of politics that I find very inspiring, how people have to work together. We all have different values. We all have principles, things that we want to achieve. But there is this politicking that takes place where people try to work together to figure out what they can compromise on in order to come together to make something a better place. And that sometimes means making alliances with people that you think are going to be the best for the country or best for achieving the best outcome and so forth. And the fact that Donald Trump was able to align himself with some of the most incredible people just due to circumstances, whether this was planned, unplanned, the way in which it manifested itself, it is absolutely beautiful. The fact that Bobby Kennedy, he was the only candidate that I truly, utterly respected in the sense that actually that's not true. I respected a lot of candidates, don't get me wrong, but the fact that Bobby I consider to be someone that is unbelievably honest. I don't know a more honest politician. And I don't agree with some of his views in regards to Israel, of course. And, I don't necessarily agree with all his approaches to how to make the world a better place, but I am so inspired. And I was all on board the Bobby train for the most part. The fact that Donald Trump was able to win this guy over, essentially that's what he did. And Bobby ended up wanting to concede in order to support Donald Trump. And he said that he did this because he felt as if he competed against Trump, he would be the reason as to why the Democrats won. Kamala would essentially win, and he didn't want to have a hand in that. And it takes it takes this utilitarian, very selfless attitude in order to do something like that. I respect that a lot. And then you see other figures coming together. We have Tulsi, and I think she's absolutely amazing. One of the things I often see on social media is that people love Trump because he has not just once but twice beaten a woman, stopped a woman from becoming president of the United States of America, right? And you think about, and it's kind of funny, but he has, right? He went up against Hillary, then he went up against Kamala, and a lot of people think that women are not going to be a good candidate, but then I think of Tulsi, and she's absolutely incredible. I think she is the embodiment of the divine feminine and masculine qualities. She's someone that is so incredibly ballsy. Once again, I'm not going to be on board with all her policies, obviously, but in terms of character, and this is very subjective, I very much like this woman. She very much is super intelligent, capable, but also has a respect for individual rights, for freedom. And this is the fundamental distinction between what I see amongst so many of the Democrats. Granted, on the conservative side, yeah, they're extremely authoritarian as well. I mean, let's be very clear about this, because someone mentioned to me that because I made a post speaking about how we're going to see a lot of progress in making the United States a great place, but also more freer and so forth. But that I want to be very clear. There are certain policies, no doubt, that Trump is going to implement that are not pro freedom, and he's done this in the past, with the lockdowns and so forth. And I just want to say though that whereas we have very draconian policies on both sides, I think one side is clearly more freedom oriented. I mean, on the left, don't get me wrong, they have been very much pro mandates when it comes to the boom shakalakas, as I call them, very authoritative when it comes to obviously taxation, wanting to take from the rich, and we can go on and on and on. But the conservative side is authoritarian when it comes to, and this is a controversial issue, and I want to be very clear about this. I 100% do not support this whole let's mutilate our children kind of thing. But the reality is, regardless of what age we're talking about here, and this is going to upset a lot of people, but when it comes to people deciding whether or not they want to be men or women in terms of how they act, that's something that I really can't control. As a parent, that's got to be hell. And I think if, as a parent, yes, you have the responsibility. You are the guardian of that child, and unless that child wants to emancipate themselves, therefore they've taken on the responsibility of claiming their sovereignty, and they have the ability to do so. It's not a matter of age. It's not a number. The libertarians that want to make this whole argument, oh, they're too young, they're under 16, therefore they shouldn't have the ability to have an operation themselves. If you're going to be philosophically consistent about this, it makes more sense because that's a very subjective issue, whether someone has the ability to truly consent. And they can consent in terms of being aware of what they're consenting to, but whether they should be able to consent, rather than using age as the defining characteristic, it's whether or not they have the ability to actually take on the responsibility to make this decision for themselves. So that would mean emancipating themselves. If someone is exercising their free will, they have absolutely the right in order to own their actions and decisions and consent to what they're consenting to. And if someone wants to do that, free themselves from the guardianship of their parents at an age, they should be able to do that. Now, obviously, realistically, you can't do that when you're 2 years old or even 5 years old. But I think that's an answer to it. I want to make it very clear that I think it's utterly diabolical and insane, the fact that goes on, that we do see men and women essentially butchering themselves, and we are seeing schools actually support this kind of stuff and hide this information from their parents. But in terms of being consistent about this is the distinction between the conservative worldview and the libertarian worldview, which is more about actually being consistent with individual rights as opposed to what's going to be best for society, because everyone has their own ideas on what's best for society. And the conservatives, because they're so disgusted by it, and they truly do think that, and I agree, that these kids don't know what's best for them, shouldn't have the right to butcher themselves, mutilate themselves, have sex changes, and so forth. They're obviously very pro the ability for, well, the leftists, the Democrats are very pro the ability to mutilate themselves, have sex changes, and so forth. But fundamentally, they are, the conservatives, being authoritarian by wanting to impose this. And I think this is a big issue, because at least I think it was a big issue, and one of the reasons the Democrats were so anti the policies of Trump, the fact that they are authoritative, at least from that perspective. And I could list many other examples of the authoritative demeanor or the policies that the conservatives often want to implement. But fundamentally, it comes down to who, at least for me, in terms of who I actually support, was the most courageous, the most charismatic. And I could get down with the fact that so many amazing people actually got on board with Donald Trump. So we've seen Elon Musk, who is a powerhouse. I mean, this guy is an absolute legend in terms of what he's done with X now. And the fact that he really was the turning point. When you look at this, the point where Elon Musk decided to get behind Donald Trump, that's when we started seeing the connections there. Obviously, Joe Rogan getting behind him, then Dana getting behind him. And I mean, whether or not these things are directly connected, but to me, that was a big point there, to see so many of these figures in the manosphere, so to speak, or I would just say the intelligent space, people that are actually real movers, understand what's going on in the world. Because the biggest criticism I have of what we are seeing within the worldview of the Democrats at present, because democracy 50, 60 years ago was more in line with individual rights. It's so fascinating watching interviews of people speak about politics 50, 60 years ago and seeing how the terms are changing. They're shifting under you to the point where the language no longer means the same thing. Now, when you speak about being a liberal, you're people have a completely different worldview. But it's very clear that the the Democrats 50, 60 years ago had a more freedom oriented worldview. And now we are seeing Republicans exemplifying that. And when you have a look at what Elon Musk has been striving for, wanting to create more freedom in society and essentially wanting to take us to the moon, to the stars, and beyond, and his ideas for the system, the American system, I was deeply inspired by that. I mean, his idea of creating an efficiency committee, wow. That is, and the thing is, this is the kind of stuff that we really should be voting for. These are the kind of policies. I mean, and also putting forward this idea. This is something that was put forth by Trump, like the idea of getting rid of income taxes. Now, whether or not that's likely to happen, I don't know. But I will tell you this: just so far, it's been a couple of days, and Trump just being in power. This is the power. This is the Trump effect. We've seen this ridiculous rise in Bitcoin. Now, I didn't realize until recently that Donald Trump spoke at some kind of libertarian convention, and this is one of the things that he mentioned he was going to do. He was going to make Bitcoin a thing, make this a currency, like really endorse this in the United States. And this is why we've seen Bitcoin rise to its highest level at the moment. I think it's a 77,000 USD at present, and I'm happy about that. Now, I was not expecting that to happen, at least in the way that it happened, but obviously people were very bullish on their crypto and their privacy and so forth. And also, I mean, just in the last 48 hours, we've seen Trump apparently called Putin, and Putin is seriously considering, from what I understand, having talks about ending this whole Ukraine crisis. And that's the kind of shit that I want to see. Now, I'm not an American citizen, but for someone that lives on this planet, that doesn't like war, doesn't like the kind of violence, that's the kind of thing that I was expecting from Trump, to actually see these moves that would actually steer away from violence, from dropping bombs on black and brown people or white people, wherever they may be around the world now. When Donald Trump ran in 2015-16, that wasn't what I was seeing. I was seeing him push more hard on terrorism and being a very militant person when it came to global politics and so forth, and I wasn't down with that. But once again, people change, and the thing is, when he was actually in power, now you can make some arguments that he continued the war machine that is the United States of America, but for the most part, if we are looking at this objectively, because I'm not biased when it comes to this kind of stuff, I've gone from being like, I don't like this guy because I don't know, and granted I didn't know that much about him, but seeing what he's actually done, I'm like, you know what, I like this guy in terms, because there's I like you in terms of your policies and morals, that kind of stuff, which I started to see a bit more, the fact that if I'm looking at this honestly, Trump was not gung-ho when it came to warfare. Now, granted, there are some assassinations. I think he was responsible for one assassination of some Iranian figure. Wasn't obviously not in support of that, but for the most part, you compare him with an Obama. You compare him with most of the figures in the United States that have taken presidents taken the reins of presidency over the last few decades, and he has been one of the more benevolent characters. So I respect that, and he seems to be continuing that. He seems to be more focused on peace. And obviously the biggest issue right now, and this is the one that really that I was willing to steer clear from. Like, I was so disappointed about the fact that both Bobby, Vivek, all the candidates I can think of, obviously Kamala and Donald Trump even, obviously, were still very gung-ho on it, and that was the Israeli conflict. Now, I am inclined to think, and I could be wrong here, that Donald Trump may put an end to this on some level. But we also have to realize that the reason as to why the Israeli war is going on is fundamentally, for the most part, it's due to the United States of America. The United States are the biggest ally of Israel. Most of the bombing that we are seeing transpire is due to the fact that the United States arms Israel. And I am inclined to think that because Donald Trump is obviously very pro-Israel, that we're going to continue to see that. But we have seen at least some efforts that have been made by Hamas to put an end to the war, and just come recently after Donald Trump has been crowned the 47th president of the United States. And I see that as being very promising. I fucking love that kind of stuff. See, I want more peace. And I guess if you're going to vote for someone that is going to bring about more peace, I, I'm inclined to think Trump was the right pick. Now, I don't deal in the realm of projections and what's going to happen. That's my gut instinct here. But basing this on character, basing this on what I do know about people at present and the administration, because we make this about people, a celebrity war. I call it American Idol, not really an election as such, because at the end of the day, there is a machine behind these people. But if there has ever been a candidate in the last 50 or so years that did not have the machine as much as greatly behind them, it would be Donald Trump, without a shadow of a doubt. He is someone that is definitely an enemy of the establishment, and I think it's very clear to say. And for the people that are cynical about everything and say, "Oh, look, it's just there are strict people are pulling the strings." Yeah, there's an element of that. But nothing is definitive in this. There are individuals, people that have this worldview that everything is controlled, that everything is controlled opposition, are, as far as I'm concerned, delusional if you're taking that to the extreme. Yes, there are factors of controlled opposition. There are people who control things, but there are also individuals that are trying to achieve things. I am someone that has my own agenda. You are someone that has your own agenda. The idea that everyone's agenda can be influenced perfectly means that you don't believe in free will. You end up adopting, essentially, at the heart of this, a communist mentality because you don't believe in the idea that individuals as sovereign beings have the ability to make decisions on how they're going to govern themselves. And when you really take this philosophy down to its core, the people that think that all of these people are puppets, right? Because this is a theme that I often hear perpetuated by a lot of the cynical people on on the conspiracy side of things, that say, oh, elections are rigged. And yeah, there is an element of that to it. Believe me, you're preaching to the choir if you want to make that argument. Yes. And the other point, I'll just nap this in the butt. Yes, it's very clear that we do see some election tampering going forth every once in a while. And it's always a question of what level, because of course there's fraud that takes place, but it's at what level it's taking place at. Yes, of course there are certain entities that are trying to change the narrative, that are trying to control people, but at what level? There's always an element of people that are of their own selves. And this is what I say to the people that think that everything is controlled, and as a result, people again don't matter. No, there are people, and I believe that Trump is one of them, that definitely has things that he wants to do, and he's not controlled in the truest sense of the word. He has his own agenda. He wants things that he wants to do, and there's certainly people that are fighting against him. And the idea that these people aren't trying to do something, or at least have the power to do something that's good, is not only unwise and stupid. I mean, we've seen just over the last few days that, yeah, there are changes that can be implemented on how the governmental world works and some of the policies that are in place, and the long-term effects that's going to have on America and the world as such. And one of the things that I'm most happy about is obviously less war, but another one is an end to this ridiculous, innumerable genders game that the left has been playing. It's just completely devoid of reality. I mean, it's one thing if you want to have that worldview, but when you want to enforce that worldview on other people, you want to punish people because they don't address you by their pronouns. You see, that's the biggest problem that I've had with the left, and I think a lot of people have had recently. I actually used to love the idea of trannies. I thought it was hilarious. It was so funny when guys dress up as women. I think it's hilarious because there's this understanding it's a joke. But it's very much shifted over the last 10 or so years now, where it's actually become, the narrative is that these people, at least some of them, actually believe that they are women. And if you don't buy into their worldview, not in a joking sense, in a real sense, if you don't actually address them as such, you now become vilified. We now see laws in some countries wanting to punish people for not playing into this ridiculous game. And I am not a fan of delusions, ladies and gentlemen. I very much deal in the real world. I don't believe in this amorphous, subjective idea, or this solipsistic worldview that people have, that everything is everything, and they change meanings, they construct arguments built of air and imagination. I don't deal in that. When I make arguments, I always separate them between my subjective ideals and objective ideas based off of reality. And the left, I find, they often want to play around in this game where there is nothing that's objective. Everything is a perspective. Everything is some assumption in regards to your worldview. And no, there is a reality. There are certain truths, and there are also certain morals, actual objective morals. There are axiomatic principles that are inherent within this universe. And unless, of course, we have a base understanding of these things, we can play this game where we can do anything we want in the interest of the greater good. And the leftist worldview, at least in recent times, has adopted concepts like that. How their genders, a woman can be anything they want to be. There's no definitive definition of anything. Everything is everything. And at least the conservatives, they have a framework that is more in line with objective reality. I don't always arrive at I don't always agree with the conclusions that they form in regards to ethics and morality, but they try to see things objectively. And their prescriptions for certain problems are more logical, more sensible. But I think both sides, if we're being honest, have their faults. And I think ultimately, if we're going to work together to make this world a better place, we need to be thinking with our hearts, being more compassionate, more accepting of people. But we also need to be dealing in the realm of logic and reason, an integration between the left and the right. And that has to do more with the archetypes, let the left obviously representing the feminine energy, the intuition, compassion, and so forth, and the right representing logic, reason, affirmativeness, and so forth. And I respect both worldviews. Now, kind of moving off the Trump train, I'll just end by saying that I am very happy with what has happened. I think it's absolutely amazing. I'm very gun ho on what we're going to see from Trump. And look, if I am mistaken and Trump ends up doing some atrocious things that violate freedoms, I'm going to call him out on it. And I'm going to obviously celebrate the positive things he does. But I will never change my view, at least as it stands, that Trump is one hell of an inspiring character. I will say that. I think of the quote, what comes to mind when I try to embody the attitude that Trump has is this quote that I heard from Winston Churchill, that I do not believe someone as great as I would be destined for such prosaic an ending. And it's this beautiful idea that you believe that you were so great, therefore the world, the universe bends itself around you in order to have great things happen to you. Trump is the personification of that mentality, of that quote, because he is so strongly convinced that he is the savior, for better or worse. And I think he is. You have a look at what happened, ladies and gentlemen. And I think the universe is definitely trying to tell us something here. Regardless of if you're a religious man, I think there's something to be said for someone with that level of will, that level of belief, call it manifestation, call it prayer, call it what you will, that was so willing to overcome all these attacks, all these adversities and so forth, creates their destiny, brings about an ending that could not be prosaic, that could not be anything other than great. And we are seeing a manifestation of the Trump story unfold because of that, because he is someone that believes so vehemently in himself, in his ability to change the world, make it right, make it better in his eyes. And I find that deeply inspiring. Sometimes it's just a battle of wills. I think will is the ultimate testing point in bringing about reality. And it just so happens that Donald Trump's will was infinitely superior to many of the people that were vehemently against him. And that's what I find most inspiring about him. As to whether or not he is going to pull through and do a lot of the things that he said he's going to do, I don't know. I would definitely love to see him pardon Edward Snowden. That's a very difficult thing to do. There is a big cost in doing something like that to your reputation, not to your reputation, but to the people that are against you. And because you want to understand, in politics, it's not so simple as I'm in power, I'm going to do whatever I want. If you don't care about being assassinated again, and maybe he doesn't. He obviously has that level of balls, but there are difficult things to do, difficult decisions if they're going to end in your assassination. And I want to be very clear. I'm the kind of person that does believe in doing the right thing or not doing the wrong thing. That's definitive. You put a gun in my head, you tell me to do something that is definitively wrong, like kill someone. I am the 1% of the population that is not going to do that. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people don't have that mentality. That's another reason as to why I very much like Trump. But when it comes to going out and doing things to help people, virtue, this is what I call it, at the cost of yourself, that's a very difficult thing. It's not as clear cut. So if he pulls through and pardons someone like Edward Snowden, that'd be impressive. I would love to see him pardon Ross Ulbricht. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I interviewed his mother some years back. It's been over 10 years, ladies and gentlemen. This man is a libertarian, someone that essentially just created a website to allow people to trade. Yes, they were trading drugs. Yes, they were trading horrible things. Bearing in mind, I want to make it very clear because people are always going to bring this up. He actually had this as a policy where they would not trade anything that would make people victims. So they would not trade child pornography and things like that. So I want to make it very clear. But essentially, he had a website. He had something like a social media site that allowed people to trade, and he was locked in jail because of that. There is more to that, but essentially, when you look at the details, like I have, essentially the the judge decided to be extra harsh on him because he was so recalcitrant in his worldview. He was someone that adopted the worldview of freedom, ladies and gentlemen, and believed that ultimately he had a right to do what he was doing because he wasn't. It was voluntary, and this is the worldview of anyone that actually believes in justice, real justice, not this amorphous, subjective, justice if it leads to the greatest amount of good bullshit that both the left and the right at times do tend to subscribe to. And as a result, he is someone that is facing life imprisonment. And I know one of the things that Donald Trump said he was going to do was he free. I believe he said this at a convention. At least this is what David Smith said in a recent podcast with Joe Rogan, that he was going to free Ross Ulbright, and I would love to see him do that. I don't think there's much of a political cost to doing that. I think most people don't even know who he is at this point. But yes, he's someone that is he's been in jail for about 10 years now, doing life for a victimless crime, essentially creating a website. Uh, and another thing I'd like to see him do is make Alex Jones the press secretary. How cool would that be? There's been talk about that on X, about how Alex Jones could be the press secretary. How cool would that for those of you that are OGs like myself? I know I don't look like it. You can't really see the gray hairs, but believe me, they're there. I've been at this game for, I don't want to say it because my age will come out. But ladies and gentlemen, believe me, I've been following all these figures that you see now that look like their granddaddies, right? For a very long time, and one of them is Alex Jones since the onset of his career, and he is someone that has been so right on the money with so many things. He has certain perspectives in regards of what's going to happen and so forth that, sometimes the conspiracy theories built of air and imagination, but a lot of times they are 100% right. And I have a lot of respect for him because he has a tremendous level of balls like Donald Trump. And as I'm sure you're aware, he was one of the reasons as to, I would say, Donald Trump was elected as the 45th president. When he was going up against Hillary, he got a lot of support from the followers of Alex Jones, and he had a massive fan base. He was back then probably almost as big as Joe Rogan, I'd say, if not as big. And I think Alex Jones is a media powerhouse. He's back on X at the moment, and yeah, you can question the validity of some of the things that he says, but I think we've seen evidently that he's gotten a lot of shit right, particularly over the revelations that have transpired over the last few years, and it would be magical. It would be it would be one of the biggest revolutionary moments in the history of American politics if we saw figures like Alex Jones become press secretary, Mr. Information Wars. Because I will tell you this, I am deeply into the works of everyone that is interested in history, metaphysics, esoteric concepts, the like real revolutionary ideas. When it comes to an understanding of American history, I am going to go out and say that I don't know anyone that has a better understanding of esoteric American history than Alex Jones. Alex Jones is the one person that really understands the foundation of the United States. We're talking about the Freemasons. We're talking about George Washington, all of the military tactics, all that kind of stuff. And it's so evident. You may not be in line with his views on the world in terms of the prescription for it. You may think he has certain crazy, wacky conspiracy ideas and so forth. But that guy is a real press man. Like in order to be a good journalist, you need to understand history, and you need to understand current day history, what's going on right now. And I don't think anyone would do a better job. Now, granted, we'd probably have to have someone to keep him in check, someone like Bobby Kennedy and so forth. But I think he'd be a great addition. That's someone I'd definitely love to see on the list. As to whether, I'm just going to finally say this because I've been waffling on about Trump for quite a fair bit now. But this podcast is pretty much addressing Trump, and I want to address a few other issues that are going on here in Australia, mate, as well. But the other thing that a lot of people, I think, are calling on Trump to do is to release the Epstein client list and the Diddy list, that kind of stuff. I'm going to say I'm not really that concerned. First of all, who cares what celebrities think anyway? Now, a lot of people want this information to come out because they want certain, like I would be more interested in having the documents in regards to what's been going off with the government's cover up of extraterrestrial craft come out onto the scene. And this is something that goes on into the deeper levels that even people like Trump don't have access to. But we are obviously seeing more information come to the light of that. That's something that's really going to have a profound effect. But if you're someone that doesn't realize that there are creepy people in power in all areas, not just the entertainment industry, but on every level, then you really haven't been paying attention. I don't see what this client list is going to do. Oh, expose these celebrities. Now you know they're creepy weirdos that have done horrible things and so forth. I personally just don't really care about that kind of stuff. And it's never been of interest to me. I already know that many of the Bobby Kennedy. One of the things I like about Bobby Kennedy is he's very open about the fact that he was on this list. You know, he's had many dealings with Epstein and so forth, and I respect that. I don't think he's been complicit in anything that is criminal as such. But I know a lot of people have been pushing for this. And as for the Diddy list, I don't really care. I think we all know that Diddy at this point in time is definitely not the kind of person you'd like to spend time with, let alone leave with your children if you have any. But I don't think that's going to really add any dimension to what's going on in the world. I want to speak about some of the things that are going on in Australia right now. And this is really important because we've seen almost as a reaction, because this just happened recently to the whole Trump being crowned 47th president. We've seen this bill or this law essentially come into effect in Australia, mate, where the Albanese government is going to implement an ID check for using social media. Now, they've said they're doing this in the interest of protecting children. This is what they always say. We're doing this because, we've got to protect the kids. It's all about the children. We've got to save the children. Ultimately, anyone that is under the age of 16 in Australia, because we need to protect them from all the harmful ideas within social media. And you think about this, right? It's coming at a time when people have so much access to information. X is obviously very free. And one of the things we've learned is, it's all about information. I mean, one of the reasons why Trump was elected, let's be very clear about it, is the fact that for the first time we've seen the power of social media. X, figures like Joe Rogan, figures like Theo Vaughn, all these people in this space, the podcast space, coming to light, the people that you and we listen to, right? We've seen these people get the message out, and it's been far more effective, I think that's very evident, than the mainstream media, the legacy media. And I think one of the ways in which you can combat the influence to the minds of these young, impressionable children is to prevent them from getting access to platforms you don't want. Now, granted, this has been done in Australia under the banner of, we need to protect the minds of these children. We may have these predators that are on these social media sites, so you can't have them out there. That's always the argument. I don't buy it, and I think it's ridiculous. Even if it was the case, it's not an argument to prevent someone from having access to information. What are we going back to book burning? We learned nothing from history. I mean, if anything, we should be fully aware that if you are someone that is on the side of censorship throughout history. I don't always use history as a precedent for what is actually right, but just out of principle, it's the wrong thing to do. But what we've seen throughout history is that you've always been on the wrong side, fundamentally, not because it leads to worse problems, which it does, but because it's fundamentally wrong to restrict information and punish people for having access to information. If you are on that side, not because it's been the precedent in history, right? That the people that did that were on the wrong side of history, but because it's fundamentally a wrong thing to do, to restrict access to information. But we found the people that have been on that side have always been on the side of tyranny. They are not the good guys. And if you're someone that is advocating for that, you want to say, oh, look, it's hate speech. Oh, no, I believe in freedom of speech, but, we got to, monitor people. Can't have everyone having access to it. You're making one of these sophist arguments. And look, I want to make you clear, you're not speaking to a Momo here. Anyone that buys into that argument is being unwise and stupid. Fundamentally, you're advocating for censorship and violation of someone's freedom of speech, and trying to reframe that as something else. And that's not what it is. Ladies and gentlemen, it very much is a violation of freedom of speech if you want to censor kids or anyone else, for that matter, from getting access to information on social media. And the frustrating thing is the only way to really implement this is to apply an ID check for everyone now, to use platforms like TikTok, X, and so forth. And that's apparently what they are looking to do. So now if you want to log on to access what's really going on in the world, you have to show who you are. And what does that lead to? Oh, now you can't say what you want, because we also have these laws in Australia where if you say something that denigrates a minority class, well, you can be punished. Like Pauline Hanson, you can go to court and be fined for it. Like, she was fined recently for a tweet that she made in 2022, and there are far worse laws in the books. And it's a way of you monitor people, and then it gives you the ability to censor them or to punish them. That's one of the reasons I call myself the esoteric noetic, not just because I deal in hidden information, ladies and gentlemen, in the esoteric, but because as transparent as I try to be in conversation and so forth, like I don't like to censor myself when it comes to what I say. Uh, but I am very secretive of the information that I give out to people because I don't want to be monitored by the government. I don't want everyone to know everything about me. I mean, boundaries are appropriate. I want to be staying hidden, at least when I'm ready to. Got to be more like a ninja about this kind of stuff. You come out and you attack when you're ready. It's kind of like how I play this whole Trump game. Most people don't realize, that I'm all, down with Trump, think he's cool and whatnot. Most people think I'm some kind of bleeding heart social justice warrior, right? I'm like, let me have my vegan food and yeah, talk about all my different pronouns and whatnot. And then they find out, or they typically don't find out, right? So they tell me all this stuff about what's going on, and then I get a real understanding of the zeitgeist. Because a lot of people, they live in their closed circles, right? Esotericism is about enclosed circles, okay? But the beauty of being an esoteric individual like myself, right, is people don't really know everything about me. Therefore, they're more in line to allow me into their circles. And as a result, by doing that, I learn about what's really going on, what they really think, and allows me to be more open, at least in my understanding of what's really going on in the world. I'm not someone that is limited to simply the manosphere, the conservative worldview. I live in all these different worlds. And when you are living in a big world and you are actually able to be in these spaces, I find you're more open to having an understanding of people's perspectives, or at least have an understanding of what is going on. And I want to live in this world where I'm dealing in both the world of these intellectual powerhouses that are actually able to have real conversations, that really understand what's going on in the world, that aren't complete momos, but also in these world full of crazy people that have these weird understandings about what sex they are, and they're all about fun and whatnot that you don't always get in some of the other more kind of rational logical circles. And I think it's important for us to live in a big world because by living in a big world, if you're not someone that is a sheep like myself, you can still benefit from learning other people's perspectives without allowing it to change who you are at your core. If you know who you are, ladies and gentlemen, you do not have to worry about people changing you. It's pretty powerful. Anyway, finally, I'll just say it is a very interesting time to be alive right now. We are seeing a reinvention of, or a reigniting of America. The principles of liberty seem to be more palpable. America, let's be very clear, has been for a long time now one of the main causes of the denigration of freedom, at least around the world, one of the causes of it. But it still honors the concept of individual freedom within the Constitution, and I respect that. And we are seeing the culmination of some of the biggest, most pivotal figures in the efflorescence of consciousness. They are really the most brilliant figures all come together to work around Donald Trump, from figures like Vivek Ramaswamy, this economic powerhouse, very intelligent man. Figures like Elon Musk, obviously, is basically a living Iron Man. Figures like J.D. Vance, who from what I've listened to, is a very capable, very intelligent man, a very brilliant figure. And of course, Tulsi, she's an amazing woman, amazing individual, period. And I think she's a massive boon to Trump's campaign. And we are seeing all of these, and of course, Bobby Kennedy. And I got to tell you, the most beautiful thing to come out of this is Bobby Kennedy. He is going to be going after these big companies. We know what we're talking about here, that have been the reason for so much of the bullshit. And it's so amazing to hear Trump said this in one of his speeches, that he is going to be going after these, these certain institutions. Because look, Trump is a man, brilliant man, but he doesn't have the time to be accessing all this information. And I think one of the reasons why he got some shit wrong back in the past is he had to. He openly said that he had to rely on a lot of people, their judgments and so forth. And now with the right kind of people, at least some of them behind him, I think we're going to see something very different. And if there's anything I want to see, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to see justice. I think in order to have peace, you do need to have justice. And justice to me is not about just denigrating people, calling them momos. I just do that sometimes just for effect, all right? But it is about seeing that the people that have committed the worst crimes are actually pay their dues because of their crimes. And you know what I'm talking about. So, ladies and gentlemen, power to the new America that we were seeing. Because this is what it was all about. The America was supposed to be this experiment in creating a new Atlantis, a society that was going to promote these principles of liberty, powerful entity, and maybe in a few years' time we'll see what happens. I might take it upon myself to look at America and look at it as a country, not just in its inception of being a promising country that was going to respect these principles of freedom, but actually being this last bastion of freedom for a free world, not just claiming to be one, but actually embodying that. And I find that to be very inspiring about what is happening right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it there. Let us know in the comments below what you feel about the new administration, about Trump. I know there are a lot of crying, bleeding heart liberals out there that are not very happy about the recent events. Look, it's not the end of the world, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pretty sure Trump is not going to be launching any nuclear weapons anytime soon. He had 4 years to do that last time, and he hasn't. And I got to tell you, it's more exciting to me. If you may not be a Trump supporter, well, you might be gung-ho on Bobby Kennedy, who is definitely going to expose a lot of the shit that's going on around the world. Is going to really try to make the health situation in the United States better. You might be a supporter of someone like Tulsi, that is someone that is very heart-centered, but also has the heart of a warrior, which I respect, Because, ladies and gentlemen, I don't buy into this whole misogyny, racism bullshit that the left tries to perpetuate. I don't think people didn't want to elect Kamala because she was a woman. I think people didn't want to, at least I didn't want to elect Kamala because she seems like a massive tyrant. And I say this because of the policies that she's actually put into effect. When Trump was in power, I actually look at his policies, not just the things that he said he was going to do, which I took issue with. Don't get me wrong. I still stand by that. He said some pretty horrible things in the past. Even J.D. Vance would be going out calling Trump names and so forth. Because when people say stupid shit, you react to that. But you actually have a look at what he did, and there isn't that much. I mean, there are things that I took issue with, but for the most part, he wasn't this tyrannical person. Now, I definitely cannot say the same thing for Kamala. When she has been in power, well, at least when she was prosecutor, she was down for a lot of not cool shit. Like, for instance, wanting to punish parents for not having their children go to school and being indoctrinated with these stupid worldviews and so forth, essentially criminalizing that and so forth. And the sheer audacity of her to punish people through the legal system, through laws and so forth, is an attitude that I see as being very anti-freedom, and that's one of the reasons I was not a fan of hers. But I do admire people like Tulsi, and I also admire the courage of Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Bobby Kennedy. These are figures that are going to take us to a new America. Ladies and gentlemen, Freaks and Geeks, peace out, keep it real, don't drive and text. Oh, and check out my new single. I got a single out called Generation Y. Speaks about this generation, this new generation, this new team of people that are taking on the seats of this planet, and just a lot of the struggles that we've been through. It's a heartfelt song. Tell your mom, tell your friends about it. Check out my album POTUS. It's out, and tune into this podcast. Give it a rating on iTunes. Tell the world about it. The Chocolate Nubian Soul Brother is not just a pretty face, ladies and gentlemen. He is the disseminator of the wisdomatic truth bombs. He is the host of the most conscious comedy podcast in the multiverse. And apparently he's got some booty fat. So, ladies, slide in the DMs. Yeah, you know what it is. Peace in the Middle East. Peace be upon your butt cheeks. And as I always say, there are three things that cannot remain hidden for long: the sun, the moon, and the wisdomatic truth bombs of the Chocolate Nubian Soul Brother. Ow!
If you've lost faith in humanity, clap your hands. If you've lost faith in humanity, and this is your villain origin story, if you've lost faith in humanity, clap your hands.
Gather around the podcast mic, open minds in the place discussing freedom, society, technology, and all things esoteric. Unraveling the mystery, seeking deeper understanding through the knowledge we transmit. We ignite the conscious brain. Talk to the crucial journey, come on and listen in. Open up your mind, find your truth, let the knowledge begin. From the streets to the cosmos, we explore what's unseen. Through the words we speak, sparks of wisdom intervene. Yeah, the crucial journey, let the wisdom flow. Taking steps to elevate, together we will grow. From the third eye perspective, we dissect the truths and lies in this conscious connect. In the multiverse's archive where secrets reside, Krishu's podcast, a conscious guide. From the depths of history to the crypto tide, he unveils the truths that many hide. Krishu, the sage of sacred mysteries, guardian of freedom, unlocking esoteric histories. In the podcast realm where wisdom's unfurled, he's a purveyor of truths from the underworld. From the creator of Bitcoin to David Icke, the guests are diverse, wisdom they spike. So tune in, seekers of the cosmic unknown. In the Krishu journey, consciousness is grown.